Hi Rangers, this video is over the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is another method that we can use to solve quadratic equations. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this right here. Now this formula will be given on your reference sheet. Okay, so you don't have to memorize it, but you do need to know how to plug things in. Now, something new is this plus or minus symbol right here. Okay, that means that we're going to add and subtract. So that is plus or minus. It is our lazy way of writing it, so we don't have to write it 2 times. But we will end up writing it 2 times when we start solving these examples. Okay, so the quadratic formula is used to find solutions of the quadratic equation in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and remember it has to be set equal to 0. Okay, we also want to make sure the equations are written in standard form. So if it's not written in standard form, we need to rewrite it, meaning the x squared term goes first, the term with an x goes second, and then the constant goes last, and it's set equal to 0. So looking at our first example, it says rewrite the equations in standard form and identify A, B, and C. Do not solve. So all we're going to do is we need to rewrite it. Now, before we can do anything, it has to be set equal to 0, which means we need to move that 6 to the other side. So it is currently a positive 6. So to move it to the other side, I subtract 6 from both sides. Then I have x squared plus 3x. And then 4 minus 6 is a negative 2. And since I did that, the other side zeroes out. So this equation in standard form is x squared plus 3x minus 2, and it equals 0. So now we need to identify A, B, and C. So A is the number in front of the x squared. Well, remember that is a 1, so my A equals 1. B is the number in front of the x. That is a positive 3. And C is the constant without a variable next to it, which is negative 2. And that's all we had to do for this. Looking at number 2, I need to make sure I solve for x. So I need to move that 4x to the other side. I need to make sure that I set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Now, there is no like term, but it is the x term, so I'm going to go ahead and write it in the middle. So I have 3x squared. Let's do plus 8 minus 4x. And then on the other side, it equals 0. Now, how I currently have it written is not in standard form. So to write it in standard form, my x squared term goes first. So I have 3x squared. Then my x term needs to go second, so it should be minus 4x. And then the constant goes last, plus 8, and it equals 0. So now I need to identify A, B, and C. So A is the number in front of x squared, which is 3. B is the number in front of x, which is negative 4. And C is the constant, which is a positive 8. Okay, now that we've practiced that, we can go ahead and go to our steps for the quadratic formula. So use the quadratic formula and the steps below to solve the quadratic equation to the right. So 1, write the equation in standard form if necessary. So if we look, we have x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So that's in standard form. Check. Step 2, identify A, B, and C. So A is the number in front of x squared, which is a 1. B is the number in front of the x term, which is negative 4. And C is the number that is by itself, the constant, which is positive 3. So now that we've done that, we move on to step 3. Substitute the values of A, B, and C into the quadratic formula. So all we're going to do is we're going to plug it in. So remember, our formula was up there. So it's negative B, so I'm going to plug in a negative 4 right here. Plus or minus the square root of B squared, so again, negative 4 squared in parentheses, minus 4AC. So A is 1, C is 3. All over 2A. Oops, the 2's already there. A, so 1. There we go. So from here, all we're going to do is simplify. Now, we're going to be careful and do step by step, not trying to do too much. So I have x equals, well, right here I have a double negative, and double negatives turn into a positive. So I have 4 plus or minus the square root. And now I want to simplify the number under the radical, underneath the square root symbol. So what I want you to do is, without the radical, I want you to type that highlighted part into your calculator to get a numerical answer. So we're going to go to our calculator, we're going to go to a new document, and we're going to go to the calculator screen. So we're going to type in negative 4 squared minus 4 times A times C. Press enter. It gives us the number 4. So I'm going to write under the square root symbol, under the radical, the number 4. And I'm going to divide it by 2 times 1, which is just 2. So do you see how much simpler it looks now? Now, we all know that the square root of 4 is 2. So we have x equals 4 plus or minus 2 divided by 2. Once you get to this step, this is where we're going to split it into 2 separate problems. Okay, so what I mean by that is I have x equals 4 plus 2 square roots of 2, and I have x equals 4 minus 2 divided by 2. Okay, so that plus or minus now splits it up into 2 separate problems. So when I keep going, I have 4 plus 2, which is 6 divided by 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. Then I have x equals 4 minus 2, which is 2 divided by 2. And we know 2 divided by 2 is 1. So there are my 2 solutions. This is another method of solving that does not require us to graph it in the calculator. Okay, this method and graphing in the calculator always work as long as there are real solutions. Okay, so the only time we used our calculator, unless we needed to do any other algebra, is for that highlighted part under the radical, that b squared minus 4ac. Okay, and then so we substituted in the values, which was step 3. Step 4, simplify the expression. That's what we did. Step 5 was split the expression into 2 equations, 1 plus, 1 minus, and that's what we did. Okay, so we did follow the steps. I just forgot to say them as we did them. So, next one. Use the quadratic formula to solve each quadratic equation. Be sure to rewrite each equation in standard form first, if necessary. Round solutions to the nearest hundredth when needed. Okay, so the nearest hundredth means that we're rounding to 2 decimal places. Okay, and we have our formula up in the corner to help us if we need it. So looking at number 3, 2x squared plus 3x minus 77 equals 0. So it's already said equal to 0. Check. It's in standard form. X squared, x, and our constant. Perfect. So now we need to identify our A, our B, and our C. So our A is 2, B is 3, C is negative 77. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this into our formula. So again, our formula is in this top corner right here. So it's negative B. So negative B. So I'm going to put a 3 in the parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of B squared. So 3 squared minus 4 times A times C. All over 2 times A, which is 2. So now that we have it all plugged in, we're going to do some simplifying. We have x equals negative 3 plus or minus. We're going to type this into the calculator to simplify it for us. So we have 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 77. I think I used the wrong symbol there. So there we go. So B squared minus 4 times A times C. Perfect. Press enter. We get 625. 625. So I get the square root of 625. Okay. All over 2 times 2, which is 4. Now, in my calculator, I'm going to type in the square root of 625. So, square root of 625 gives me 25. 625, the square root is 25. So, I'm going to rewrite that as x equals negative 3 plus or minus 25 over 4. So now that I've done this, I can go ahead and write it as 2 separate equations. I have x equals negative 3 plus 25 over 4. And I have x equals negative 3 minus 25 all over 4. Okay, so looking at the first one, we have x equals negative 3 plus 25 is 22 over 4. And then we could type that into the calculator as needed. So if we type it into the handy dandy calculator just to show you, we have 20, was it negative? No, it's 22 over 4. And that simplifies it as a fraction. Remember, if you hit Control Enter, it does change it into a decimal for us, which is 5.5. Because it did say it wanted its answers as decimals. So x equals 5.5. Now, you could have typed this right here directly into the calculator and got the same results. So it doesn't matter when you type it into the calculator. I just went ahead and did the simplified version. But it would probably be best to type this part right here. Oops. This part right here into the calculator. Okay. So this next one, let's go ahead and type this right here into the calculator. Negative 3 minus 25 over 4, just to show you that it does work that way. So I had negative 3 minus 25, all divided by 4, and it gives us negative 7. So again, I was just showing you how you can use the calculator to help you simplify these. So I get x equals negative 7. And if you like to do more things by hand than by calculator, that's awesome. Negative 3 minus 25 is negative 28. Negative 28 divided by 4 is negative 7. So whatever makes you feel better. So our final answers are 5.5 and negative 7. Now, just to show you that the calculator does work with this, as far as graphing goes. So if I graph it, just to refresh our minds, we do 2x squared plus 3x minus 7, d7. We get that. Remember, menu 5, 1. Menu 5, 1. I use my arrows to go over to my zeros. Okay, we got to tap a little bit. Oh, I passed it. So there's that positive 5.5. If I go to the other side, there's that negative 7. So just to show you, the graphing method also works. We will get the same results. Okay, going back. Okay, I'm going to pick up the pace with these. So if you need to pause to write down anything at any time, please do so. So number 4, we notice that it's not set equal to 0. So we have to make it set equal to 0 first and write it in standard form. So I'm going to subtract 27 from both sides. That leaves me with 4x squared minus 3x minus 27. That is set equal to 0 now that we did that. So my A is 4, my B is negative 3, and my C is negative 27. Okay, so we're going to plug it into our formula. So negative B, so I'm going to plug in a negative 3, plus or minus the square root of B squared. So negative 3 minus 4 times A times C. So 4 times negative 27. Okay, all over 2 times A, which is also 4. Okay, so here we go. We start simplifying a little more. Minus a negative 3 gives me a positive 3, plus or minus. I'm going to go ahead and type this right here into our handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to go over to my calculator, get a new document, and go to the calculator screen. So I had negative 3 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 27. Press enter. That gives me 441. 441. So, oops. So square root of 441. Now, you know how I've been simplifying everything? Well, hold on. Let me finish what I was doing real quick. So 2 times 4 is 8. Now, you know how I have been doing a lot of work over here to simplify. Well, let's say that causes us to make mistakes. What we could do is go ahead and just separate it now. Plus or minus. So we got plus the square root of 441 divided by 8. And then we also have the minus version or the negative version. So 3 minus the square root of 441 over 8. Okay, so you could also go here and just type that directly into the calculator. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that looks. So I'm going to be typing this right here in the calculator to get the numerical answer. So 3 plus the square root of 441 over 8. So I'm going to go ahead and get my fraction button. 3 plus the square root of 441, all divided by 8. Press enter. It gives me 3. Awesome. I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of a plus, I'm going to say minus the square root of 441 all over 8. I get a fraction. Remember, it wanted us to round to 2 decimal places, so we need to change the fraction to a decimal. So we're going to hit Control Enter, and that gives us negative 2.25. So we had positive 3 and negative 2.25. So again, just showing you when you can use the calculator to do these problems. So let me go ahead and erase that. Our final answer, this one gave us x equals 3. This one gave us x equals negative 2.25. Okay, working on your algebra skills, meaning simplifying just numerical expressions, is always good for us. But it's also a way to make a mistake, and I want y'all to be very successful. Okay, here we go. Number 5, we got to make sure that it's set equal to 0. So I need to move over that 2x term. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. It has no like term, but I'm going to help us out by putting it in the middle so it's in standard form for us. Minus 168 equals 0. So now that we have that, we can identify our A, B, and C. So A is 1, B is negative 2, C is negative 168. Okay, I plug it in. negative b, so negative 2 plus or minus negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 168. Okay, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Now, if you really wanted to, you could type this into the calculator, 1 with a plus, 1 with a minus. Okay, but what I would suggest is doing this first, because that tends to be the part that messes everybody up. Okay, so I have x equals a double negative turns into a positive plus or minus the square root. I need to simplify under the radical, but it's all going to be divisible by 2. So I'm going to type what I just highlighted in the calculator. So I have b squared, which is negative 2, minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 168. I get 676. 676. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and split it up into 2 separate fractions. So I have 2 plus the square root of 676, all divided by 2. And I have x equals 2 minus the square root of 676 divided by 2. Okay. So now that I have that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to type those into our handy dandy calculator. So here we go. We have our fraction button, and it was 2 plus the square root of 676, all divided by 2. That gives us 14. So this one is x equals 14. Now I'm going to repeat that same process, but with a minus sign instead of a plus sign. So I have the fraction button, 2 minus the square root of, I forgot to write the 2. 2 minus, there we go, the square root, 676 all over 2. That gives me a negative 12. So our answers for this are negative 14 and 14 and negative 12. Okay, when you go to Algebra 2, you will definitely learn more in depth about these problems because quadratics and using the quadratic formula can be a lot of fun. Okay, number 6, here we go. We're going to set it equal to 0 by subtracting 8 from both sides. So I subtract it from its like term. I get x squared minus 6x plus 2 equals 0. So my a is 1, my b is negative 6, and my c is 2. So I plug it in. Minus a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. All over 2 times 1. Okay, so the double negatives with the 6 tell me that I really have a positive 6 plus or minus the square root. I need to simplify that, and then it's going to be over 2. So I'm going to type this into the calculator. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. That gives me 28. Now, this is where it's going to vary. Some of us will be able to simplify that radical. Some of us won't. But for the sake of this, it did say it wanted decimals, so I'm just going to give it to you in decimal form. So I'm going to have x equals 6 plus the square root of 28 over 2, and x equals 6 minus the square root of 28 over 2. Okay, so we're going to type that into our handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to get my fraction button, 6 plus the square root of 28 over 2. That gives me 5.65. 5. That 4 rounds up to a 5. Okay, and then 6 minus the square root. So my fraction, 6 minus the square root of 28, all divided by 2, gives me 0.35. Okay, now for my kids that want to learn more, there is an exact answer. What we have is not the exact answer, but will be justified with what you're doing on the STAR test. So if we wanted to go more exact, I'm going to change my pen color to show you. If you're not really caring about this, you can skip this section. But this right here could also be simplified by simplifying that radical. So remember, the square root of 28, let me write off to the side, can be broken down into the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So that would be the square root of 4 times the square root of 7, which would be 2 rad 7. So a more exact answer for this would actually be x equals 6 plus 2 square root of 7 all over 2. Then I hope you see that all of these numbers on the outside of the radical are divisible by 2. So the exact answer to this would be 3 plus the square root of 7. Okay, so that's just using the simplifying radicals that we learned previously. Okay, but again, this wanted decimals, so that's why I did the decimal form first. Okay, next question. A firework is shot from a platform that is 100 meters high. The height of the firework in meters h can be represented by h of x, where x represents the time in seconds. If the height of the firework is 75 meters, write the equation that can be used to find the amount of time that has passed. So what that means is we're going to set our equation that they gave us equal to 75. So for A, our answer is going to be negative 5x squared plus 20x plus 100 equals 75. Okay, then we're going to solve for it. Because we've been solving with the quadratic formula, we're going to use the quadratic formula to help us. So here we go. First off, we need to make sure that it's set equal to 0, so we have to subtract 75 from both sides. So when we do that, that gives us a negative 5x squared plus 20x plus 25, and it equals 0. Now that we've done that, we can identify A, which is negative 5, B, which is 20, and C, which is 25. So then we plug this information into the quadratic formula. So that is x equals negative b, b is 20, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. So a is negative 5, c is 25, running out of space, all over 2 times a, which is negative 5. Okay, so that leaves me with x equals negative 20 plus or minus the square root. We need to type that into the calculator, all over 2 times negative 5, which is negative 10. So I'm going to type in this to the calculator. So 20 minus 4 times negative 5 times 25. So here we go. We have 20 squared. Now I'm thinking I typed it in wrong. No, I have it right. 20 squared minus 4. There we go. Minus 4 times negative 5 times 25. Boom. We get 900. Okay. So now I have x equals negative 20 plus the square root of 900 divided by negative 10. And I have x equals negative 20 minus the square root of 900 divided by negative 10. So we're going to type those two answers in to our calculator to get our final results. So I have my fraction button. Okay, we have negative 20 plus the square root of 900 all divided by negative 10. That gives us negative 1. Then we're going to do the same thing. Negative 20 minus the square root of 900 divided by negative 10. And that gives us positive 5. Okay, so our answers that we got are x equals negative 1 and positive 5. So this was our answer. This right here was our answer before I solved for it. Okay, now, which solution makes sense in the context of the situation? Now, remember, we're talking about time. We cannot have negative time, so therefore the only answer that would make sense would be x equals 5. Okay, because we cannot have negative time. Okay, so make sure you summarize your lessons, write down any questions, and ask your teacher. Have a great day, Rangers.